I'm Professor Steve Giambrone. I teach in our science division here. So thanks for being here. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Nick Wesemann, and we're going to introduce our panelists today. So I hope you guys came hungry for some chocolate, hungry for some knowledge. And I hope you have some good questions that you ask our panelists as they present their side of chocolate. All right.
Morning, everyone. Again, I'm Chef Nick. I work in the hospitality department over here. So yeah, we're just going to have a conversation about chocolate, cacao, and all that. But first, I kind of want to let these people introduce themselves, tell you guys who they are, what they do, where they're from, and just give a little bit of their background before we get going. So kind of pass this down and share.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike King. I own Encore Coffee and Chocolate. I'm a coffee roaster and bean-to-bar chocolate maker. I'm based out of Grandview.
My name's Ethan Taylor. I work at Christopher Elbow Chocolates, the director of operations there, and I've been there for about 20 years. So, we're based in Kansas City.
I'm Theresa Korte. I'm the face behind Melted KC. I'm mostly a food blogger and home chocolatier, and I'm based in Overland Park.
And Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Enriquez, and she is my sister, Mayra. We are from Costa Rica, and actually we are trying to incentivize with a new project about the tour of cacao. And also, my sister and I, we have a crop of around 35 trees of cacao. And actually, that's why we are immersed in this new world of the cacao production.
Awesome. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us from Costa Rica. So first of all, I just want to kind of ask, I want you to tell me your experience with chocolate cacao. So I know we have like some growers, we're importing. Where are you sourcing your cacao? And kind of just explain like what your process is with cacao currently at the moment. So we can go one by one, or if anyone wants to jump in. It's kind of
I'm kind of in a little different position because I'm both a coffee roaster and cacao roaster. So most of my cacao I import through a couple of, or buy from a couple of importers here based in the United States. I've got that and one out of Canada. So really that's kind of where I source my cacao. Right now I have 6 different origins of cacao that I carry. What was the other part of the question?
yeah, like your sourcing and what you're doing with it.
Sourcing, so basically like when I'm evaluating cacao, really the kind of the easiest way is just really to make small batches of chocolate and taste it. There's really no shortcut of really evaluating cacao. You can look at the fermentation and aspects of the physical bean, but really when it comes to taste, you have to just make small batches and taste it. And I've done that many times, and that's really kind of how you evaluate your cacao.
We probably use a lot of the same importers that are available in the U.S., but we always Chris has done a lot of traveling, and being able to visit the farms is a good way to kind of establish those relationships. So we try to do that when we can, but just roasting the beans, and we do some bean to bar production as well. So that's kind of what we do with the cacao.
I don't actually do any bean to bar production, so I don't work with the raw ingredient of a cacao bean. I brought some packaging that you can look at later. I use chocolate that is already produced and ready for me to shape. So my process is more about what are the different ways I can manipulate and use chocolate in an artistic way, in a tasty way, and being respectful to the ingredients that are in them. So I am curious because I didn't know Christopher Elbow did bean to bar, and I'm also curious, do you then produce your chocolate that you use for the molding?
We do bean to bar on a smaller scale. So we have about a 50 kilo refiner. So that's what we can do at a time. But we do our single origin bean to bar stuff just for ganaches that we use in our our collections, and then also single origin bars as well. So, but the other chocolate that we use, we have custom blended made for us. So that's what we do for all our bonbons and our confections.
No one's going to be able to hear you, so. Okay, hang on, folks. We have a question from the audience. Here you go.
Thank you. So when you're determining your chocolate and you're testing it, if it's a lower quality of a bean or cacao, is there a way that you use that you can elevate it so it's not a complete loss?
It really, it really just depends on the beans itself. Most of the time, if it's poorly fermented, there's really not a lot you can do with it unless you're going to use it as a secondary product. I'm pretty much focused on just doing, my focus is on origin bean to bar chocolate. So when you can manipulate the roast to a certain degree to get different profiles out of it, but if it's bad, it's bad. I mean, my philosophy is I'm trying to highlight what the farmers are doing. And so, you really spend a lot of time focusing on quality up front. And just as the saying, your ingredients coming in is going to be a reflection on the products that you put out. So if it's really kind of poor quality, I typically would reject it and just not use it.
Andrea,
Yeah.
do you have any comments about your aspect, since you're working on the farms in Costa Rica, one of the sources of cacao? Do you want to add anything?
Okay. Well, we are actually not importing cacao seeds because here in Costa Rica, it's like normal to see or have some trees in a garden. That's why we took some trees from my grandma garden some years ago and we put it into this property. So we are actually carrying those trees and we try to make some new products or cook this product to make things like chocolate, hot chocolate, or a dark chocolate in order to have a good quality. So, and some of the most important things to keep in mind is, for example, the fermentation that, as our partner says, the fermentation makes that you will have a good quality of cacao.
Awesome. Thank you. So we kind of already touched a little bit on like what everyone's process is, but what kind of processing do you do? Like I know you mentioned you're mostly bean to bar, you're kind of buying your chocolate in and shaping it, but so what can you go into more detail about the processing? Like are you both roasting beans? And I know you mentioned you like to focus more on like the farmer. And I know like to compare it to coffee, when you're focusing more on like highlighting the farmer, when you're doing coffee, you roast coffee a little bit less to kind of bring more of that chocolate. Does that hold with coffee, at least, does that hold true with chocolate, or with when you're roasting chocolate, is it more, you're still kind of roasting everything to the same level?
Roasting the two is completely, same physical process, but it's completely different. Really with coffee, you can manipulate flavors and body and acidity a lot more than you can with cacao. There are aspects in cacao that you can adjust, flavor profiles, but that's more of a acidity and sweetness that you can adjust in the cacao. I roast on a 15 kilo gas roaster. So I roast in batches about 25 pounds. And then I use stone melangers to refine the chocolate and hand mold everything.
I don't have anything else.
Yeah. Thinking about your process,
So I think for me, and if you're working with chocolate at home or you're someone who just enjoys to eat chocolate, you're looking more at, is it a dark chocolate? Is it a milk chocolate? Is it white? What is the percentage? And you can also get different flavor profiles based on the percentage of cocoa in the chocolate as well as the origin. So more to what you were saying with your bean to bar, there are different origins that have different flavor profiles. Maybe they're more floral, or maybe they have more caramel notes, or maybe they're more earthy. So those are things that when I'm looking at a product that's already produced that I'm going to manipulate, I'm trying to identify the level of cocoa content as well as the origin and flavor profiles of that particular brand.
We got a question from the audience. Here you go.
Where does ruby chocolate come from?
Ruby chocolate. Where does ruby chocolate come from?
Would you like to feel this, Andrea?
Could you answer that?
Yes, well, the cacao comes from South America. That's where mainly appear those fruits. After that, because of the animals, was spread for all America. And actually, we have different ways to spread those trees that are by small trunks or small parts of the trees, by seeds, and also by, well, there is another way, like we call injertos, that are joined one part of a branch with other one. And here in Costa Rica, there is a centro de estudio, that is the CATIE, that actually works with two different type of cacao. That is the criollo, that is the natural, and also the trineanos. They call trineanos the one that are interviewed for humans.
And then I think you want to. Oh, ruby.
Yeah, ruby chocolate. Ruby chocolate is, first of all, it comes from a special bean, but typically they adjust the fermentation during the chocolate. They add like acid to it, so it undergoes like a different fermentation, which changes the flavor, changes the color. So it's still like coming from a cacao pod. It's just mostly done with the fermentation, and then obviously less roasting because you're not going to get those dark chocolate notes out of it. But yeah, it's like that for me.
Is it called ruby chocolate because it's red, or? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's red and it's kind of fruity, kind of berry, but very much kind of the polar opposite of, well, not polar opposite, but not as dark and roasty as dark chocolate. So for you guys, for you, what do you consider high quality chocolate, or what does it take to make like a high quality chocolate product? Is it the ingredients? Is it your skill? Or to you guys, what does high quality chocolate look like for you?
In the case of the quality of chocolate, it is important the fermentation. When you open the fruit, you have to take the seeds and put it in a box, of a wood box, mainly of laurel, and you have to have the seeds for around 7 days, and every 2 days you have to move the seeds in order to have a good fermentations. Then you have to take the seeds and put it in an other open wood box, and you have to wait, and the seeds needs to receive the sunrises for at least 4 or 5 days. After this process, the seeds are ready to be roasted.
Importance of fermentation there. For you guys that are bringing them in, how about you?
Yeah, like since we do, both confections and also bean to bar stuff, I mean, it's just, they're a little bit different, but still, good quality products equal a good outcome. So, when you get your beans in, I mean, yeah, consistency is a really big, factor. Good fermentation, like was mentioned, is really important. And also, just a good roast, and then also good refining and making sure that you have really nice smooth chocolate at the end of a bean to bar production. When it comes to confections, yeah, definitely quality products always going in. Really good tempering of your products is really important. For us, it's really important to have the shine and the snap and everything, to have them be as beautiful as they are delicious. So we do we take a lot of care in choosing, like you said, choosing products to highlight whatever flavor profile that we're going for whatever the flavor is. So we may choose different chocolate products to, pair with whatever flavor it is. So we're very intentional with that. And I think that's the really important part, is to look at what your end goal is, and then figure out how to get there with what you have available. So.
I would say kind of echo it. I really focus on using quality ingredients up front. You're selling a premium product, and the cost difference between buying some of the top of the line ingredients and mediocre ingredients are not a huge factor, at least for my business. So, for example, like when I was selecting a sugar, I made chocolate with different sugars, and you can really taste that molasses profile in some sugars and not. I source like all of my sugar from it's called a Brazilian Green Project. It's all sustainable cane sugar production. It's just a superior product, and I think that's reflected in my end product. Same like with making milk chocolate. I use an A2 protein milk powder, which there's only really one farm in the United States that's producing it. And it just makes a superior milk chocolate. It's much more milky and smooth. So really kind of focusing on your quality and ingredients coming in, directly reflects on your product out.
I'm just going to provide a little anecdotal thing. When my family first started, and I'm sure a lot of you have used or tasted or experienced, I mean, we just did like homemade candy, right? And we used Peter's or Merkin's chocolate melts, or similar to what you would find at Hobby Lobby or grocery store, like Ghirardelli's doing a decent chocolate melt right now. And the first chocolate class we took as a family, just to kind of up our game, we taste tested those next to actual fine chocolates, and it was like eating candles and eating not candles. So I think it's important, and when I think about my products and I'm creating things, I focus a lot on sourcing local ingredients if I can, or supporting local businesses, since I'm buying some products that are already created, right? I don't make my own formulas for the chocolate, but I do source my cream and vanilla and butter and other ingredients like that. I try to be local, and I keep in mind chocolate is a luxury product, and so you want to be using high quality ingredients to get all of those qualities that they were discussing. So
so the question is, what gives chocolate that, or your like your candy melts, what gives it that waxy taste? You want to field that, or
fillers? So it usually has if it even has a cocoa mass percentage, it's a lower percentage. So there's more artificial fillers, there's more artificial like oils, or highly processed oils, a lot more sugar content, and other things like that.
you get that? And when you talk about like the candy melts versus chocolate, like chocolate has a much higher percentage of cocoa butter, whereas those melts are using other hydrogenated fats and things like that that don't give you the same mouthfeel. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to like the amount of cocoa mass in it that you get the actual flavor of the chocolate, and then also like the quality of the fat, which for high quality chocolate would be your cocoa butter. What does the future of the chocolate industry look like? Are there any changes coming up with chocolate, or what should kind of consumers be on the lookout for? What can they expect to see in the future coming up?
I guess from my perspective, prices are going up. We're at least the future markets for cacao pricing. We're at appears to be a high, and going to start to see some decline hopefully next year. It's really hitting everybody in the chocolate business. Costs is just continuing to skyrocket. It's 3x for cocoa butter from a year and a half ago. So we're seeing substantial price increases. I'm seeing probably on a consumer level, probably a higher demand for quality products. People are it's an affordable luxury, and people are willing to drop $12 for a bar and just have a piece or two a night versus large consumption. So those are at least what I'm seeing in my business.
I don't have much other to say than that, other than we've been paying under what we should be paying for cacao for decades and forever. So it's going to catch up to us, unfortunately, but we just have to be able to kind of bear with that for what we can. So that's the unfortunate truth.
Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
They said that we will have a lot of cacao during the next decades, but according to the investigation that I made some days ago, is that, well, after some days, for example, here in Costa Rica, in the decade of 70s, we lose a lot of cacao plantations because of the monilla, and what was a plague that affected most farmers here in Costa Rica. After this decade, they cut down a lot of farms here, and actually, we have more than 90% with small farms of at least 3 hectares, and just few farms around the 10%, basically with biggest one. For example, the CATI, the Centro de Investigación in Turrialba, Costa Rica, and also in Talamanca. But in our country, we are undergrowing the enough quantity of seeds to cover the industry necessities.
So you mentioned like costs going up and how we're underpaying, and kind of like looking at it as a pastry chef and like, or as a baker, the trend kind of going forward is like, at least in baked goods, like either you're doing something that's very chocolate focused and charging for it, or you're backing away from that. Like chocolate isn't necessarily being used as like a secondary flavor because it's too expensive. When you're making chocolate, when you're doing confections like that, you don't really have a choice to like back off on the chocolate when you're selling chocolate. So what kind of changes to your production have you had to do? What kind of changes to your menu have you had to do, or are you looking to do to kind of cope with these rising costs? Are there any like strategies that you've come across to help with that?
Mainly cutting where we can that's not chocolate. So, unfortunately, like everywhere else, labor is going up. Cost of goods everywhere is going up across the board. So trying not to pass on everything to the consumer has been a big focus. We haven't raised prices since 23, I think. So it's been difficult. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This has been probably the worst stretch of years since we've been around. So it's been challenging, but yeah, like you said, it's our main ingredient in what we do. So we have to kind of go with that, and being a premium product, hopefully people are willing to pay for it because it's, you get what you pay for. So.
I was gonna say, my change, I probably do a little bit less white chocolate bars just because they're a high percentage of cocoa butter, and that's the most expensive component in chocolate making is the cocoa butter. I'm right now evaluating other product lines which use less chocolate in them. Like a pan product is kind of where we're seeing some trends of moving into different products, just simply to kind of balance out your cost structure. Because that's the biggest challenge, and really becoming a more efficient company. Looking at making investments into tempering machines and the things that make you more operational efficient. I think that's kind of where I've seen at least my fellow makers really kind of adjust lately.
So I'm in a really different place because I'm not a brick and mortar business. Most of my chocolate making is for my personal use, gift giving, or charity. I do a lot of pop-ups for charities, or do baskets and different things for galas and what have you. And I think from my perspective, there's still a lot of education to be had when it comes to chocolate, because there's a lot of people who really don't know the difference between a Hershey bar and a bean to bar, or like a piece of Russell Stover, or a piece of Christopher Elbow, or something like what I make. So when I value the chocolate at what it costs me to make it and my time, it seems almost like sticker shock for a lot of people, because they're like, well, I can buy a Hershey's bar for $1. But it's just not the same. It's apples to oranges. They're just not the same. So that's still part of my journey, is more of the education and helping people understand the differences.
So this is leading up to kind of the big question that is kind of one of the promulgating issues that is behind the whole series of talks and our study abroad trip that's coming up next January. And Andrea, we want to get your perspective on this as well. But the next question is, what issues regarding sustainability of chocolate, cacao, and the chocolate product should consumers be aware of? So if you guys can chat about that a little bit.
In our case, we work as an organic farm. It means that we don't use pesticides nor fertilizants for the crops. So what we try is to do a healthier product, since you put the trees into the earth. It costs that the people or the guests that we came here to our farm carry the information of to have a healthier products, that they are consuming a product without pesticides nor fertilizants or other additional product to the chocolate they are eating. For example, we produce dark chocolate without any other additional thing, and also a grinded chocolate that you can add to milk or boil water and taste the delicious flavor without any additional chemical or other flavor. So to add a little bit more, is something important to know is that the chocolate has 50% of chocolate and 50% of oil or manteca de cacao, and that's very healthier for human, because that oil doesn't affect the population. In contrast, health for digestion, health for skin care, and health for many other things, or also for your brain.
Would you like to speak to sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, climate change, natural disasters, all of those things are definitely causing issues with sustainability. But I think awareness is the biggest thing that we have to push for the general population. First off, I don't think general people don't know where food comes from, and that is really unfortunate. So I think there's a lot of people that don't know where chocolate comes from either. So I think that education is a huge factor in hopefully reaching the sustainability that we need to continue to be able to supply chocolate for the greater population. So it's I think that's really the most important thing, is to educate people on where it comes from so they can have an appreciation for it.
I was just going to say, agree with everything said. I think the biggest thing as a maker that you have to start using quality products and communicate to your customers as to why your product is different and why the price point is different. I try to use all sustainable products. As I mentioned, my cane sugar is, I even buy my sea salt from a small producer in the Carolinas that, solar evaporates seawater. It's like, you can take it to an extreme, but there's a difference in the quality, and really just educating, as you said, people on where chocolate comes from, because most people have no idea, even me as somebody that was an enthusiast before getting into the business, I didn't quite have the level of knowledge that I do now. And it's just something you have to continue to communicate and educate, and things like this is what's really going to make an impact on our products moving forward.
How can a consumer know they're buying something sustainable? Are you putting any of that literature on your marketing or your branding, or what are some things that consumers can look for, or questions they can ask to know that their chocolate's being grown properly, or sustainably, or that it's being processed sustainably?
That's a really tough one. I look at, like, for example, if you go to my website and you look at my chocolates, all the farm level detail is there for all of my origins. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible on everything that I sell. As a consumer, the biggest challenge is right now in the chocolate industry is really kind of more child slave labor. A lot of the big companies, in my opinion, kind of ignore that fact. So I try to buy all of my cacao from direct importers that have relationships with those farms, so that I know, and a lot of them, you probably buy from the same sources, they have transparency reports, which kind of give you, ultimate transparency as to even like what they're paying for their cacao. Because everybody's got to make money in this business. It's just a matter of trying to find that balance as to, where money is made, but really just kind of being transparent. And again, it goes back to education. There's really, I would say Tony's Chocolate is probably the only large producer that tries to be really ethically forward. I think a lot of the others kind of really, especially with the child slave labor, it's a horrible problem and people just continue to ignore it.
I was going to ask about that. Is there any way for the consumer to know how to avoid child slave labor? Just the consumer avoiding child slave labor advice for chocolate.
Really just buying from small producers like myself and makers that show the transparency. I have an acquaintance that he's a pretty big advocate for changing that, and has made his career kind of really trying to make change in that business. And they're just so large of companies, until consumers change their behavior in buying from smaller makers, I don't see that we're going to have a ability to make a big impact.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, I think, for Andrea. In Costa Rica, when the issue of child or slave labor in the chocolate industry is a big one, and it's something that consumers need to be aware of. But this is especially more implicated in African source, cacao going into chocolate. Tell us more about the Costa Rican sourced cacao. Is slave labor an issue with consumers buying chocolate that's sourced from Costa Rica?
No, well, here in Costa Rica works mostly as a farms, but not with children. So with adult people that can have their own crop, but without the children's work.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Kind of going on to that, can you speak to, like, we hear like fair trade coffee, fair trade chocolate? And I feel like a lot of consumers use that, like they see fair trade and they think, okay, this is okay chocolate to buy if we're looking for that. Is that necessarily true? What are some kind of caveats that you would kind of maybe put along with fair trade in that label?
I'm not a big fan of the labels, to be honest with you. I think that they all have good intentions, but like I'm friends with a Guatemalan coffee farmer, and he just laughs at organic certifications. He's like, I have seen the same coffee get labeled as organic and conventional. So I no longer really pay much attention to the certifications. I just go by quality.
The question was, what does fair trade mean when you see that label on the label? But you want to speak to that?
I don't know what the definitions. I mean, it's obviously intended to give the farmers back more money for their products, but I don't know the definitions.
Do you want to speak to that? Or?
Hold on just a second. If you can repeat that.
I was asking because depending on what you consider to be fair, that's kind of a big gap, or could be.
My understanding is, I mean, it's essentially a certification that you pay for. So you prove that you do these things, and then you pay for the certification, and you can label it fair trade. So, which can be good because if they're buying this, then yes, it is fair trade, but it's also kind of prohibitive in that, like, if you're a small farm, even if you are, doing everything ethically, you are essentially fair trade, but it's not cost effective for you to pay for this certification to put on your chocolate. So, just because it isn't labeled as fair trade doesn't necessarily mean that it's not coming from a farm that's doing right by their workers and their growers and everything else. So it also, I mean, it's also kind of like, I don't know, it can be good, but it can push out farmers that are trying to do the right thing just because they can't afford to have that on their label.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. It's complex is the short answer, in that consumers could be under the impression that if they buy products that have those labels that, everything's fine, but it's much more complex. And you could be buying a product that has all the labels, all the certifications, and yet there still could be issues with the sustainability, and all aspects of sustainability with the product. And conversely, there can be products that have no labels, but they're much more ethically and sustainably sourced. You had a question.
No, were you going to answer, sir?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that the biggest thing that whenever we're looking at fair trade is that the biggest goal for us as chocolate producers is to make sure that the farmers are getting a fair wage for what they're producing. And so the fewer people you can get between the farm and the consumer, the better. So I think if you can source a product from a maker that, you know, is transparent in who they get their beans from, and then the person they get their beans from is transparent to where they get them from, if there can be just one or two steps of separation away from the farm, then you are actually doing much better than anything that you can find on packaging, on labels and stuff. So ask the questions, buy from small people. I think that's the biggest thing, is the fewer steps between maker and or from consumer to farm, the better.
And I was just going to follow up. So this is maybe part of the whole process, but I was just curious about each of your stories, like how you kind of got into the industry and like, you know, and even just including the things we're talking about now is great, but I'm just curious about that too.
So the question is just tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into the industry.
I found a rabbit hole. Basically, my family just was making, like I said, typical homemade candies. And I have 2 sisters and my mom, who we all usually work together, at least from the beginning. I do a lot of solo now because I'm geographically on my own. But we wanted to learn more. And every time we learned a little more, we wanted to learn more. And so we just kept digging and learning more and more and more. And we get better as we move along. And that's kind of how I got started.
My story is different than the company story. So I actually didn't start the company, but Chris Elbow did. He started as a pastry chef and was working at the American restaurant in Kansas City, and started making little bonbons for check service to drop off at the end of the meal. People started asking about him, and then he decided that that might be a good option. So he decided to do that, and that's where that happened. And I just started working with him part-time for a while, and then he took me on full-time after culinary school and everything. I went here to JUCO, and it was a good experience. And yeah, so I've been there for 20 years now. So it's been a really nice experience with that.
I have quite the different experience too. So I started my coffee roasting business 8 years ago, especially coffee roaster. During COVID, I kind of realized that my industry was not going to be the same with so many shops going under and having challenges with labor. So I was really looking for another product line. And I had some early exposure with Askinosie chocolate down in Springfield. So I was aware of kind of fine chocolate. But during COVID, honestly, it was out of having time on my hands. I started making chocolate. And I really kind of enjoyed the aspects of roasting and, you know, manipulating flavors. And so I launched chocolate 3 years ago at Christmas time, and was so busy I couldn't keep up. Then since then, I've kind of won 2 awards for my chocolates, which has really kind of continued that path. I honestly never thought I'd be a chocolate maker in my life, but here I am. So it's just, I enjoy that manipulation of the roast and the flavors, and that's what kind of interests me and how I kind of got into chocolate.
Yes. Andrea, tell us about your farm story and how you got into.
Well, in our case, my sister, as I told you, she has a small farm with some trees. And as she produced and she elaborated, I told her that we can try to work as a cacao tour. And actually, the visitors came to the farm. We can go around the trails and we teach them how manipulate the trees, how manipulate the products to achieve have the cocoa. And in terms of sustainability, we try to teach how we can care those plants without affect the environment.
Awesome. We may have touched on this a little bit already, but what guest trends are you seeing? What are consumers? How are consumers buying chocolate? What are they expecting? Are you seeing like flavors that people like, or just what do you see the guests kind of going towards, and how are you meeting that?
What are consumers looking for? They're looking for when they come to see us. I mean, they're looking for delicious products, something with a wow factor. But I think that there for a long time, everything was dark chocolate. I find that people are really liking some sweeter chocolate now. Also, a lot more milk-focused chocolates, which is really fantastic because I have grown to absolutely love certain milk chocolates, but they are not all created equal. As you said, certain milk powders are just different and they're not good. But anyway, I think that, there's just different trends. But I think the biggest thing is over the years since we've been doing this is the fact that people are understanding the difference between chocolate candy and then also fine chocolate. So there's a big difference, as you were talking earlier about how, coating chocolate is definitely different than couverture. And so I think that that's a big thing, is just people's perception of quality. Quality is a big thing, and I think that's benefiting the whole industry.
I would say there's more of an emphasis on the artistic part of fine chocolates or artisan chocolates. That something that I might hand dip does not have the same wow factor as something that has the colorant, which is just colored cocoa butter, or a transfer sheet that might be a more intricate pattern that's printed from a food printer with colored cocoa butter. I've got a couple examples you guys can look at and taste later, but you can see the shine and the colors, and more of the artistry is what people are wowed by. And if they're going to pay $3, $4 for a piece of chocolate, they want it to really look like a little piece of art. And so I'm noticing more of a trend in that, and people shying away more from what looks like that might just only be chocolate, or might not have just the same visual impact.
Does the medical industry have a big impact on chocolate? So a couple of decades ago, they really pushed dark chocolate because it was healthier. Does that still impact you guys as well?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, the question is like the medical industry and like the purported health benefits of chocolate. Is that still having an effect on people's consumption? So, does dark chocolate, how good is dark chocolate for you and all that?
I mean, there are health benefits to eating chocolate, as we know. Not only does it make us happier, but it definitely does have good benefits. I mean, the thing about dark chocolate is, just with anything, there's less sugar. So that's the biggest thing. Just eat less fat and less sugar and more chocolate, you'll be good. So
I actually have been reached out. I've had two different CBD and I don't know how to phrase it properly because I'm just not in this area, but like basically marijuana and dispensary type places. I've had two different ones reach out to me and asking if I would work with their products to make chocolate products with CBD or actual marijuana. I might not be speaking correctly on my drug side. Sorry guys, it's not my thing. And so I declined because I really don't know how to work with it. But that is definitely trending as well, that you have bean to bar makers that are using those as additives and people perceiving them as a supplement or a health benefit to that. And I do think there is still a perception, particularly by women, of dark chocolate being healthier. So it's okay because it's dark chocolate.
We know that there's a genetic basis for liking cilantro or eating. Is there ever been any studies done on that cause for loving dark chocolate?
The question is, has there been any studies done on liking chocolate versus not liking it? I'm not aware of any. Are you guys any? I haven't met a lot of people that don't like chocolate. It seems to be few and far between like the cilantro divide, but not that I've seen.
I've never seen anything either, but I think one of the differences, I get a lot of customers into my shop that's, the first thing, oh, I don't like dark chocolate. And then they try my dark chocolate and they're like, oh, it's pretty good. I think really kind of a reflection on that is that there's so much bad chocolate out there that people have this expectation of what they're going to get, that they're going to get a really bitter experience. But like you try my chocolate, a lot of it is very fruity. It tastes like it's got ground cherries in it or raisins. Quite the opposite experience of like what I had growing up. I think that's probably the biggest impact.
Are there any innovations in the chocolate industry, like recently, that have kind of changed the way you work or the way chocolate's processed, or are there any upcoming innovations, or what's changing about chocolate, maybe in like a positive light, like getting away from the doom and gloom of cost and everything, but what kind of cool stuff has been happening with chocolate, or what exciting things are coming up with it? Anything?
I haven't seen anything. I guess at the farm level, we're seeing some changes in the fermentation of cacao. But equipment wise, I'm just not large enough to really kind of understand some of the automation. I don't know if you deal with any of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So over the past probably 10 years, there's been a lot of really exciting products coming onto the market just as just chocolate confection stuff. I mean, like the whole inspiration line from Valrhona has been amazing, just to be able to work with that, because there's just been a lot of really cool things that they brought to the table. And the inspiration line is really just it's freeze-dried fruits mixed with cocoa butter and sugar, and which makes a chocolate couverture type product, but it tastes nothing like chocolate because it's actually flavored with whatever the freeze-dried fruit is. So they've got a passion fruit one, and a strawberry, a raspberry, and a yuzu one. They're all amazing. So you can do anything you can do with chocolate with those, and so it's brought a whole lot of really exciting things out for that. But I mean, there is, now they're trying to do lab grown chocolate, which is pretty interesting. Well, I mean, we haven't tried any of that or sampled it, but I mean, it's on its way. So that's exciting. I'm not sure if we'll ever get to that point where we'll be using it. But one thing that I don't think that has been mentioned, so going back on a farm level, and we talk about how much we love chocolate and everything, but we have to understand that most of the cacao pods that we get have about 40 seeds per pod, and it takes about 500 beans to make 1 pound of chocolate. So when you think about the amount of fruit that you have to harvest in order to get just our daily or yearly consumption per person, it's almost astronomical, unreal. So just think about that when you're eating it. So that's why whenever we're working with chocolate, we always respect it and try to scrape as much out of the bowl that we can, because you're really wasting everybody's labor when you throw it away. So anyway, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, that kind of segued into something I wanted to ask. What is one thing each of you would like to tell consumers? It's like just for your knowledge, like awareness about the industry. So that kind of goes for everyone. Like, what's something you'd want us to like leave with as like a bit of knowledge about?
So the question is, what would they like to tell a consumer about chocolate? So what piece of information would they like to leave here knowing, or say they may not have known before?
I think that was mine. Just the fact that it takes 500 beans to make a pound of chocolate, because really that's a lot of hard work that the farms have to produce, before we even get our hands on it. So it's actually much more precious than we ever give it credit to be.
Andrea, would you like to answer that question as well? What would you like the audience to know if you could have them leave with one piece of information?
Well, something important facts for this product is that we here in Costa Rica are trying to teach about sustainability to the new population. So basically, the most important part for us is to cultivate this product and to still have this kind of trees as a economical source here in Costa Rica, because actually we don't have the enough farms, and we are trying to incentivize the crops of this. So because to create the chocolate, to have a chocolate, so we need the trees, and we as crops needs to grow up with this plantation.
Thank you.
I'd say, I guess, two things. I guess one is I really try to communicate to people that chocolate is an agriculture product. I think people really, kind of like you had mentioned, people don't understand where our food is coming from now. And that's what I stress in my communications with my customers. I'd say probably the second thing is to really kind of support small businesses. It's not just supporting me, but I try to source all of my products from local importers, or as much as I can. I buy locally, and it just kind of continues to support our community. And I think there's nothing wrong with buying large production chocolate. There's places, I mean, obviously you use it, but I think the more that we do to support one another, I think the greater impact we're going to have in the world.
Actually, we are producers, but in other cases, other people are consumers. Consumers to build a new product, the sweet chocolate, the chocolate with pineapple, chocolate with somebody else. But at first, we need the product to establish different different products based in this crop.
I would say from my perspective, because I'm not as close to the source as all of you guys are, is just understanding all of the different steps that chocolate goes through before it gets to you. And you have the actual growing, you have the fermentation, you have the roasting, you have the processing, figuring out the percentages and the additives. And then for someone like me, I then take that and process it more, right? So I'm tempering it and I'm adding different ingredients or different fillings or whatever. It's a very time intensive. Every bite of chocolate you have is very time intensive. And a lot of people have thrown their passion into that piece of chocolate. So I guess that would kind of be my takeaway, is just understanding that there's just so many layers to it before it gets to you.
Kind of piggybacking off all that, like, we talk about that it's becoming more expensive, and there are reasons behind it, but I think we have to become okay with understanding why these chocolates are more expensive and why they should be a little bit more expensive. Like, if we're getting cheap chocolates somewhere along, the reason is probably somewhere along the line is like, it's probably because like a farmer is getting underpaid, or they're utilizing child labor or something like that. That's why they're able to get it for a lot cheaper. So I think it's kind of your due diligence to buy quality, buy from local, buy smaller, because they're probably sourcing it more ethically. And I mean, I think that cost is worth it, at least for me.
Is the cacao tree subject to blight like a banana or a chestnut or anything like that?
And this could also perhaps be a question for Andrea, if she can still hear us. But the question was, is the cacao plant subject to blight or pathogens, fungal, bacterial pathogens? Yeah, similar to other products like banana. And the answer is yes. In fact, Andrea mentioned that back in the 1970s, Costa Rica had a burgeoning cacao production, industry in the country, and that was devastated. It kind of hit crescendo in the 1970s, and a lot of those farms that were growing cacao switched to banana. And now even other tropical, fruits that are grown there. But the answer is yeah, and those have to be mitigated just like any other crop. There are different approaches. There could be chemical approaches, but then there also can be more what's referred to as integrated pest management and best practices. So all of these issues would be, these are all the issues we're going to be discussing in our course that will be connected to our study abroad trip. In fact, everything that we've covered today will be part of our curriculum. Another question? We'll repeat it.
I don't know if you addressed this or not. I couldn't hear it. Could you mention briefly the studies regarding lead in cacao?
Studies regarding
lead.
Oh, lead.
In cacao, and if it's something that you have looked at, if you
Heavy metals in the plant.
considered it.
That might be a question for Andrea.
Yeah, the question is about studies involving lead in cacao. I'm not aware of any. I haven't looked into any. I don't know if any of you have. Andrea, do you have any insight into that?
What, sorry?
So the question was the idea of contamination from lead, the heavy metal lead, which is a chemical element in the soil. The lead, cadmium, these are heavy metals that can get into plant tissues as the plants take up water from the soil. It gets into the roots and can get into the plants themselves, even crop plants. Andrea, do you have any information about heavy metal contamination in cacao?
Well, it's a fungus. The Monilia is a fungus that affects the cacao. This is a kind of candida. It affects and makes some white spots around the fruit. And after that, you have to cut down the trees. Also, well, to have this plant, you have like 2,000 millimeters of water around the year. So you need that the water must be distributed during all the month. And well, actually, we live near to a rainforest, near to the Braulio Carrillo, and that's why we thought that our trees are in good conditions because they have to be cultivated in an earth around 800 meters under the sea levels. Those are some of the conditions they need to be to stay healthier.
Yeah, thank you. Do you guys have any?
Yeah, I mean, the heavy metals in cacao has kind of hit the news about 3 years ago or so, and it's kind of been kind of in some people's minds. We have our chocolates tested for heavy metals, and everything's tested underneath the limits, and it's one of those things where, going back to being an educated consumer, just ask questions, because the threshold that I will allow heavy metals in my body may be different than yours. So I don't pay a lot of attention to it personally, but that's just me because, that's just my take on it. But the information should be available if you ask for it. So yeah, we've had a lot of testing done, and everything has come back fine. But like she said, I think it does have to do a lot with rainfall, and it will vary year to year, and so it's kind of a moving target for a lot of things. So yeah, that's what I can speak on. So,
Have any other questions from the audience? Okay. Okay. Well, let's give a round of applause for our guests for coming here and joining us. It's been a great panel, I think.